Hello, students. Come, today I will take you to the world of fantasy. Now, let us see what is the surprise party waiting for us. This man, J.R.R. Tolkien, he will take us to a world of fantasy. He was an English writer, poet, and academic. He was born on 3rd January 1892 and died on 2nd September 1973. He was the author of the classic high fantasy works, The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Together, these works form a connected body of tales, poems, fictional histories, invented languages, and literary essays about a fantasy world called Middle-earth. This is an abridged excerpt from The Hobbit. Now, you must be wondering what is the meaning of abridged? Abridged means having been shortened. So, The Hobbit has been shortened and named The Surprise Party. Now, children, what is fantasy? We all love to dwell in the world of fantasy, isn't it? What is it, by the way? A fantasy is a genre in literature that includes magical, supernatural elements as part of the plot, setting, or theme. So you would find something very unnatural which does not belong to the real world situation. It concentrates on imaginary and not real elements. This can mean magic, the supernatural, alternate worlds, superheroes, monsters, fairies, magical creatures, mythological heroes, essentially anything that an author can imagine outside reality. Children, can you see? Can you see the pictures where you would find that they all belong to some supernatural world? They are not from the real life situations, right? Now, what is the story about? Just before tea time, there came a loud ring on the front door bell. Bilbo ran to the door. "I'm so sorry to keep you waiting," he was going to say, when he said that it was not Gandalf at the door. Then who was he? It was a dwarf with a blue beard tucked into a golden belt. As soon as the door was opened, he pushed himself inside, just as if he had been expected. Now, children, what would you do when you find someone unwelcomed, uninvited, standing at the door? You have no options other than welcoming him. And when that person pushes you in and pushes inside the house, then what would you do? Now, it was not expected by Bilbo. He was expecting Gandalf. But Duolin, the name of his guest, he pushed himself inside as if he was expected. "So Duolin at your service," he said with a low bow. "Bilbo Baggins at yours," he said, surprised. He was utterly surprised. It's a very normal response. When the silence that followed had become uncomfortable, he added, "I am just about to have tea. Do come in and have some with me." What would you do if an uninvited dwarf came to visit without a word of explanation? What would you do, children? What would be your normal response? Won't you get surprised? Won't you get astonished? And a silence would prevail. That silence would invite lots of questions. Who is he? Where has he come from? How long is he going to stay? Why has he come? All these questions would come into your mind. They had not been at the table long when there came an even louder ring at the bell. "Excuse me," said the hobbit. "It's Gandalf for certain this time," he thought as he puffed along the passage. But it was not. Again he got shuddered. It was not Gandalf. It was two more dwarfs, both with blue hoods and yellow beards. "What can I do for you?" said Bilbo. "Killy at your service," said one, and Filly added the other. They both swept off their blue hoods and bowed. So they were humble, they were modest, they just swept off their hats, blue hoods, and bowed low. "At yours and your family's," replied Bilbo. remembering his manners this time. Let us join the throng, said Killy. Throng? Thought Mr. Baggins. I don't like the sound of that. Throng. What does it mean? It means a crowd or a large group of people. Perhaps he was not liking the gathering at all. It was quite unexpected. He sat in the corner trying to collect his wits. Wits means your intelligence. He is trying to think what is happening while the dwarfs sat round the table and talked about mines and gold and troubles with the goblins and the threat of dragons and lots of other things which he did not understand and did not want to. So what was the conversation going on among them? They were talking about the golds and mines and troubles with the goblins and the threat of the dragons and lots of other things which he did not understand and did not want to, for they sounded much too adventurous. Now, what is goblin? Is a small imaginary creature that tricks people. A goblin is a small imaginary creature who tricks people. Then again a doorbell. Ding dong, a ling dang, his bell rang again. Someone at the door, he said, blinking. Some four, I should say by the sound. Who said? Philly. Besides, we saw them coming along behind us in the distance. So they were all coming in a group. A poor little hobbit sat down in the hall and put his head in his hands and wondered what had happened, what was going to happen, and when they would all stay to supper. Then the bell rang again louder than ever and he had to run to the door. It was not four after all, it was five. Dorry, Norry, Ori, Oin and Gloin were their names and off they marched in to join the others. Already it had almost become a throng. Some called for drinks, one for coffee, and all of them for cakes. Oh God. Already they were unwelcomed, already they were uninvited, and they were just calling for coffee, drinks, and cakes. All of them want cakes. So the poor little hobbit. What does hobbit mean? Hobbit means an imaginary creature who had long hairs and looked quite different. So he was thinking, who is this hobbit here, children? It refers to Bilbo Baggins. So Bilbo was thinking, he was wondering, what is the reason for their coming here? I mean, I don't know them, they don't know me, so why have they come here? And they are behaving like they know me for generations after generations. They know, they are so well acquainted with me. And how long are they going to stay? Are they going to stay till the supper? So all these questions began to come to his mind. The dwarves were starting on a round of buttered scones. Can you see the dining table? The happening dining space. When there came a loud knock, Bilbo rushed along the passage, very angry and puzzled. He pulled open the door with a jerk and more dwarves. The last of these was Thorin, an enormously important and proud dwarf, and there was Gandalf behind, leaning on his staff and laughing. So Gandalf was a magic wizard. So he was leaning on his staff. Staff means, as magic wizards carry a long stick used for support. So he was leaning on his staff and he was laughing. Now the dwarfs were starting on and they were having merry time. But who was angry? Bilbo. Bilbo was very angry and puzzled because he did not understand what was going. Now, we are all here, said Gandalf. Quite a merry gathering. I hope there is something left for the latecomers to eat and drink. So Gandalf was wondering if something is left for them at all to eat and drink. Yes, let's have some more cakes and coffee, called the other dwarves to Bilbo. So Bilbo was ordered to bring more cakes and coffee. But put on a few eggs, Gandalf called to him as the hobbit stumped off to the kitchen. So he added, what did Gandalf add to the cakes and coffee? Eggs. Put on a few eggs, Gandalf called to him as the hobbit stumped off to the kitchen. Stumped off means when you are very angry, children, don't you walk noisily? So that is called stumping off. By the time Bilbo had got all the dishes and knives and forks and glasses and plates and spoons and things piled up on big trays, he was getting very angry and red in the face. Bothered these dwarves, he said aloud. Why don't they come and lend a hand? Lo and behold, there stood Balin and Dwalin at the door of the kitchen. So see, so Bilbo, this is very normal. This is very natural for one person to serve so many of them, and they were so insensitive. They behaved in a very insensitive way. They were ordering as if he was a chef, and he is at their service, not they, as they told at the beginning when they came. So why don't they come and lend a hand? He said aloud, "Lo and behold." So lo and behold is an expression of wonder and surprise. He was utterly surprised. And who were there? Before, and Bomber behind them. Before he could say a word, they had whisked the trays into the parlor and set out everything. So before he went, they had done the needful. Gandalf sat at the head of the party with the 13 dwarves all around. The dwarves ate and ate and talked and talked. At last, they pushed their chairs back and Bilbo made a move to collect the plates and glasses. So see how helpless a person's situation can be. All left their places, and who was there to clean the table, to put off the plates and glasses after they have finished their supper? Oh, it was the Bilbo Baggins. I suppose you will all stay to supper. So do you think this question is asked wholeheartedly, as if he wanted to ask how long are they going to stay? No, he was actually vexed. He was actually tired. And he was curious to know how long are they going to bother him. "I suppose you will all stay to supper," he said in a polite and unpressing tone. "Of course," said Thorin, "and after we shall not get through the business till late, but we must have some music first." The dark filled all the room, and the fire died down, and the shadows were lost. And suddenly, first one dwarf and then another began to sing as they played their instruments. "Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away your break of day to seek the pale enchanted gold." So what is the meaning of dungeon? A dark underground room used as a prison. Cavern, it's a large cave. The dwarves of yore made mighty spells, while hammers fell like ringing bells. In places deep, where dark things sleep, in hollow halls beneath the fells. So yore means here long ago. It's an old English here used. And fell means a high hill. Goblets they carved there for themselves, and harps of gold where no man delves. Where no man delves means where no man leaves, where no man goes. There lay they long, and many a song was sung unheard by men or elves. Elves means a small imaginary creature with magical powers. The bells were ringing in the dell, so since it's a high fantasy tale, you will get number of imaginary creatures. The bells were ringing in the dell. Dell means here a valley. These are all old English. And men looked up with faces pale. Then dragon's ire more free than fire. Dragon's anger, ire more free than fire, means a dragon's anger was more fierce than fire. Laid low their towers and houses frail. Frail means here tower and houses crumble. They are nothing before the dragon's anger. Far over the misty mountains grim, to dungeons deep and caverns dim, we must away your break of day to win our harps and gold from him. As they sang, Bilbo suddenly felt the love of beautiful things made by hand. Then something woke up inside him, and he wished to go and see the great mountains and hear the pine trees and the waterfalls and explore the caves. He looked out of the window. The stars were out in the dark sky above the trees. He thought of plundering dragons settling on his quiet home and burning it all to flames. He shuddered. Very quickly he was plain Bilbo Baggins again. So when they sang, suddenly Bilbo Baggins started going into the world of fantasy. How? He felt the love of beautiful things made by hand. He became adventurous. He wanted to explore the mountains, the waterfalls, the caves. He looked out of the window. The stars were out in the dark sky above the trees. So as if he thought of plundering dragons and burning it all to flames. But again, he suddenly came back to reality, and then he shuddered. Smaug, the dragon, had taken over the caves of the dwarves. They wanted help from Bilbo as they came to his place, unannounced. So see, the dwarfs came with a purpose. Why? Now, what was the purpose behind their coming unprecedentedly to Bilbo's house? Now, they wanted help from Bilbo because they have lost their caves. Who had taken their caves? The dragon. But did Bilbo offer any help to them? What happened to Smaug? Now everything you have to find out. If you want to know all these answers, you have to read the full of The Hobbit. Okay? I hope you have understood the lesson, children. Read the word meanings that are given in the brackets in the book. Now let us open our vocab window. I will give you some words and their synonyms and the antonyms. The first word is uninvited. What is the meaning of the word uninvited? Unwelcomed, unexpected, right? And what would be the antonym? Naturally, invited. Certain synonym is unquestionable or definite. Antonym, doubtful, unreliable. Unpressing tone, polite. Synonym and antonym, heated. Enormous, gigantic or huge. And antonym for enormous is insignificant. Synonym for plunder, ransack or loot. Antonym for plunder, provide, deliver. Now children, come, spell these words with me. Dwarf, dwarf. What would be the pronunciation is? Dwarf. The pronunciation is dwarf. Gandalf. This is one word which is made up of two syllables. Gandalf. So the pronunciation is Gandalf. Tron. Throng. The pronunciation is Tron. Enormous. Enormous. It is also a three-syllabic word. Enormous. Okay? Enormous. Now, what are the questions? Let us discuss some of the questions from the text. Who was Bilbo expecting? Children, yes, Gandalf. How did Bilbo react when the visitors started pouring in? Bilbo was quite surprised. He could not but receive the uninvited guest, though he showed hospitality in the beginning, but later when the visitors started outpouring in numbers, Bilbo grew angry, puzzled and irritated at the oddities shown by the guest. So what does Bilbo feel about them? Bilbo thinks they are very loud, unmannered and does not like unexpected company. Now what does Thron mean? Thron means a crowd or a large group of people. Why didn't Bilbo like this word? Bilbo was quite unprepared to receive such an uninvited gathering. Perhaps to show his dislike, he did not like the use of the word Thron. He was already tired with one or two guests, and when they were telling that a Thron had come, so he was disgusted. In what manner did Dwalin enter Bilbo's house? As soon as the door was opened, he pushed himself inside as if he was very much expected. Now, why did Bilbo offer tea to Dwalin? What does it reveal about him? Bilbo offered tea to Dwalin out of courtesy. It shows that Bilbo was a person of hospitable gesture, because he showed compassion to the already arrived guest. He gave him tea and he gave them food. He served them food. Name some of Bilbo's uninvited guests: Dwalin, Fili, Kili, Ori, Nori, Thorin, etc. were some of his uninvited guests. Now children, think differently. How do you justify the title, The Surprise Party? Now I'm giving you some outline. See, getting surprised is very normal towards any unexpected incident. In the story, Bilbo gets surprised at the unprecedented arrival of his guests who happen to be dwarves, isn't it? So when Bilbo, who was expecting